Hey everyone, and welcome back to my ByBloomAndMoon channel. My name is Naringa, and today we are making this cute festival top. The top is made to measure, so you can make to fit your body perfectly. Also, the star appliques is optional. You can make with them or without them. I will put 3 pictures on the screen just to show you how it looks in a plain version and 2 different versions with the appliques on. Because the top is made to measure, you can use any yarn weight you prefer. I will talk more about that in the material section, but for my top, especially this one, I used all my leftover scrap yarns. I will show you how you can do that as well. You can tie them together. I will show you this process step by step for you, and you can make into like one big ball. Then when you're making your top, you don't have to weave in all the yarn tails into the work, so it's really good option. And of course, if you don't like the scrappy version like I did here, you can use just one color for entire top. Also, the stitch markers is a must for this project because you will create those large stitches, and while you do your back and front panels, your work will stretch in all ways. So the stitch marker on the first stitch will prevent you from losing your stitch count, and trust me, it's very easy to do on this project. Now what I'm about to say can sound a little bit scary, but we are going to crochet this top with 30 centimeters of negative ease. I know it sounds scary, but I promise everything will be fine because you're going to take your own measurements, and I will show you how to calculate everything to make your own top. Also, we need that 30 centimeters of negative ease because our stitches are very large and we are creating this stretchy material. Also, we want a fitted version, so the 30 centimeters is a must. Now let's talk about how this top is constructed. You will start crocheting your top with the back panel, working from the bottom up. Next, you will make the front shoulder sections and continue with the front panel. And you work your front panel from the top down. After sewing the front and back panels together, you can add extra length if needed before finishing the bottom edge with a small border. Then you will add a little sleeves followed by the neckline edging, and the final step is attaching the appliques. Now that we have talked a little bit about the top, let's go over materials. First things first, let's talk about materials you will need and what you can change if you are using different yarn weight. For my top today, I'm using leftover scrap yarns, mostly cotton fiber, and I have tied all the small pieces together into one big ball, so I don't have to stop and join new yarn while I'm crocheting. Later in the tutorial, I will show you exactly how to join your scrap yarns together so you can make one large ball as well. Also, using your scrap yarns this way, you will need to weave in just a few yarn tails later on, but just not from joining the yarn. Most of the yarn I'm using is a sport weight, mainly from Drops Saffron, with a few small amounts from other brands. As long as all your scrap yarns are the same weight, you will be good to go. For this project, I'm using a 9mm crochet hook, and if you're using sport weight yarn, I recommend using 9mm crochet hook as well. If you're using different yarn weights such as double knit, use 10mm crochet hook, and if you want to use Aran weight, you can use 12mm crochet hook. Using much larger hook keeps the stitches nice and loose, giving the finished top plenty of stretch, and that's what we need for this top. If you are using smaller hook and follow the same calculations I will show you later, you won't get the same result and your top may turn out too small. You also need a 5mm crochet hook or whichever size is recommended on your yarn label to make the stars. I will talk about this later. In addition, you will need a measuring tape to take your measurements, scissors, darning needle, and at least 2 stitch markers, but I recommend to have 4. The stitch markers are especially important because the stitches in this project are very loose and super stretchy, making it easy to lose your place or miscount your stitches. So now that we have discussed what you will need, let's move on to taking your measurement section. Now you need to grab a measuring tape and measure the fullest part of your torso. For me, that is the bust area, so that's the measurement I'll be using. Don't pull the tape too tightly, just wrap it comfortably around body and take your measurement. If another part of your torso is your fullest point, such as your waist or stomach area, measure that instead. And we will use your larger measurement to make sure the top fits comfortably. Now let's measure the length of your top. Take your measuring tape and place it at the middle of the shoulder where a shoulder seam would normally sit. Let the tape measure hang straight down and measure to the point where you would like your top to finish. We will talk more about the length later in the tutorial because this stitch is very stretchy. And once you start wearing the top, it will naturally stretch and become slightly shorter. For now, simply measure to your desired length and make a note of that measurement. Later on, if needed, you can also always add a little extra length while you crocheting. Now when you have your bust circumference measurement ready, make a note and we are going to subtract some bust ease. And as I mentioned before, we're doing the top with 30 centimeters of negative ease because we want our top to be stretchy and fitted. It means your top circumference, your finished top circumference will be 30 centimeters smaller than your actual circumference you measured for your fullest part. So now you need to take this fullest part circumference measurement. I got 91 centimeter and you will need to subtract 30 centimeters from that measurement. And I got 61 centimeter. It means my final finished garment circumference will be 61 centimeter around. And now, because we will crochet this top in two separate panels that is connected through the shoulder line, first the back panel and then the front panel, we need to calculate the width of both panels. So you need to take that circumference measurement, which is mine 61 centimeter, and you need to divide by 2. And I got 30.5 centimeters. Yours will be different, of course. It means that my back and front panels will be 30.5 centimeters wide. And now when you start crochet your work, it means your foundation chain should be 30.5 centimeters long at the beginning. Now when you finish all calculations for yourself, for your measurement, we can start crochet our top. Before you start your top, if you would like to make your top from the scrappy scraps like me, I really recommend to tie them into one big ball. I will show you how to do that. But if you are planning to change color just in a few places, you will be good to do that in the progress. Or if you are working with one color, you can skip this section and move to the foundation chain. Now to tie your scrap yarns together, you need to take 2 pieces of those scrappy scraps. And for first one, you need to unravel a little bit of tail and just place like I do now. Just like that. Then you will grab another piece and you place that tail above the first one. Now you will grab the very first one. I'm doing with the white one, and you need to place the white one on top of another, on top of the yellow for me. Then you will take the same yarn tail and you push behind the yellow and behind the white. And you can see this loop, you need to take that yarn tail and place into that loop. Grab from another side, keep on those 2 yarns and just tighten up. So now you have your first knot. For the second, the yarn on the right should be below the another one, and you place this yarn on top of the white one or other color. Then you take this tail and push behind the white and the yellow. And you have this loop. Just right here, you take the tail and you push into that loop, hold on those two yarns and tighten up. Now you hold onto those scraps and tighten up those two knots into a one. And this way you have a really secure knot, it's not going to break in mid-project. Just take the scissors and cut those yarn tails not far from the knot. And now you take those two yarn ends and just make sure it's really secure, because sometimes if you're not careful you can cut into a knot. And now you can start wrapping the one side of the scrappy yarn onto another to make a ball, then join another one, and this way you can create a ball. I'm just joining my scrap ends to the big one now, and we can start crochet our top. To begin, just a quick reminder again that you need to prepare 2 stitch markers. This step is really important because they will help you keep track of your stitches. This fabric is very loose and stretchy and delicate, so it's easy to lose your place. By marking the first stitch of every row, you will make sure that you don't miss any stitches and that your stitch count stays the same throughout the project. Now you need to leave a longer yarn tail and make a slip knot. I like to do by twisting yarn like this. This is your working yarn. Bring the working yarn behind the loop and grab it with your fingers and pull it tight. Insert your hook into the loop and you have your slip knot. From here we will make chainless single crochet foundation. This means you will be creating your foundation chain and your first row of single crochet stitches at the same time. Try not to crochet too tightly here. The looser your tension, the stretchier your fabric and your top will be. Your hook should move through the stitches very easily. To start your foundation, you need to yarn over and pull the yarn through the loop on the hook for the first chain. Then you need to yarn over again and pull the yarn through the loop on the hook for the second chain. Now you have 2 chains. And you need to insert your hook into the very first chain you made, making sure you insert your hook under both loops. Just right here, yarn over and pull the yarn through those loops. Yarn over again, pull the yarn through one loop on the hook. Then yarn over one more time and pull the yarn through 2 loops on the hook. And you just made the first single crochet stitch. Before you move to the second single crochet stitch, you need to grab a stitch marker and insert your stitch marker into that very first single crochet, just right here on the bottom. This will be your first single crochet stitch. It can look that you have 2 here, but you actually have just 1. That's why it's important to place the stitch marker just to indicate your first or last single crochet stitch. Now let's make the second single crochet. Hold your work with the stitch marker facing down. Look for the 2 loops along the side of your foundation, where is the bottom of your single crochet stitch. You need to insert your hook under the both loops here. I will grab a needle just to show you where under those both loops is. And when you insert your hook, you need to yarn over and pull up a loop. Yarn over again, pull the yarn through one loop on the hook. Then yarn over again and pull the yarn through 2 loops on the hook. Now you've just made your second single crochet stitch. And for every stitch after this, repeat exactly the same steps. Find the next pair of loops. Insert your hook under those both loops. Just right here. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over again, pull the yarn through one loop on the hook, yarn over again, and pull the yarn through 2 loops on the hook. And now you have 3 single crochet stitches in total. Sometimes it can be difficult to find the next pair of loops because they like to hide. If you can't see them right away, don't worry, they're always there, just underneath the edge of your previous stitch. So let's continue repeating this until your foundation chain measures the width of your top. In my case, that is 30.5 centimeters, but your measurement will be different, of course. And don't forget to count your stitches because it's really important when we're going to do the neckline part. When you finish your single crochet foundation chain, you just drop your chain gently on a flat surface. Do not stretch because the foundation chain should be measured on stretch, and you just drop the measuring tape not far from your foundation chain and measure from the very last single crochet stitch until the stitch with a stitch marker. Now the very top of the row where your stitch marker is, so you can follow that and it will help you easily find where to make your first stitch when you start the next row. Here you can see very last single crochet stitch. And for the next row, you will be working double crochet stitches across. So to start, you need to chain 2 and turn your work. From this point, we will start counting the rows from row 1, as this will make it easier to keep track of your progress and stitch count. And for the row 1, the chain 2 does not count as your first stitch. So you will be working your first double crochet stitch into the very first single crochet stitch from your foundation row. To make your first double crochet, you need to yarn over, insert your hook into the very first stitch, going under both loops, yarn over again, pull the yarn through the stitch. You will have 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull the yarn through 2 loops on the hook, yarn over and pull the yarn through 2 loops on the hook. Now you have made your first double crochet stitch. You need to grab a stitch marker and place a stitch marker into that very first double crochet stitch. Now you just continue working with double crochet stitches across the row, and sometimes it can be difficult to see your stitches on this first row. Later on is a little bit easier, but if you twist your foundation chain like this, you will see this V of your single crochet stitch. So you need to insert your hook there under the both loops. And you need to make sure the stitch count is exactly the same as you had for your foundation chain. So let's do that off camera. Let's make those double crochet stitches in every stitch across, and I'll meet you at the very end. Now at the end of row 1, just recount the stitches, make sure you have exactly the same number as your single crochet foundation chain. Now you should be able to see every stitch clearly, and you will start counting from the stitch with the stitch marker, and then we can move on to the next row. Now for the row 2, you need to chain 2, turn your work, and we're going to repeat double crochet stitches across the same way. Chain 2 does not count as your first stitch, so you just make 1 double crochet into the first stitch right here, and you will continue with double crochet stitches across in every stitch. So let's do that off camera and I'll meet you at the very end. Also, do not forget your stitch marker into the very first double crochet stitch. For the row 3, you need to chain 1 and turn your work. Chain 1 does not count as the first stitch, so we will start crochet into the very first, and you're going to make a single crochet stitch. So insert your hook into that very first stitch, yarn over, pull the yarn through the stitch, yarn over and pull the yarn through 2 loops on the hook. Now you have your very first single crochet stitch. Do not forget the stitch marker, and you're going to repeat with the single crochet stitches across the row in every stitch. So let's do that, and I'll meet you for the row 4. For the row 4, you need to chain 1 and turn your work, and you are going to repeat exactly the same single crochet stitches as before. You need to make single crochet into the very first stitch. Do not forget stitch marker, and then continue with 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch across the row. For the row 5, you need to chain 1 and turn your work. We are going to crochet single crochet into the back loop only, and I will show you where you can find this back loop. Also, chain 1 does not count as the first stitch, so you're going to start into that very first one. Now you can find your back loop where is V, and there is a first strand of the V and there is a second strand of the V. So you need to insert your hook into that second strand of the V, just under this one strand, not 2. So you insert here and just make a simple single crochet stitch. For the next one, you have this V and you will insert under the second strand into the back loop. Now you just need to continue with single crochet stitch into the back loop only across the row in every stitch. The row 6 is exactly the same as the previous one, so you need to chain 1, turn your work, and continue with single crochet back loop only across the row in every stitch. For the row 7, you need to chain 2 and turn your work. You will be making double crochet stitches into the back loop only, and chain 2 does not count as the first stitch, so you will start making your first double crochet stitch into this very first where the chain 2 is coming from, and insert your hook under just one strand under that back loop. So you need to continue this row making double crochet stitches into the back loop only in every stitch across. After the 7th row, you want to check if your work is straight, if your edge is straight. If it widens up, you need to tighten up your tension, or you can change the hook into a smaller. If your work starts shrinking, going kind of tapered way, you need to loosen up your tension, or you can change your hook into a larger one. Also, if your edge isn't perfectly even throughout the project, just a little uneven, that's not a big deal because you will be sewing your 2 panels together and you will be using a loose stitch, so it will kind of even itself out. However, you still want to keep the sides as straight as possible. Just make sure your work isn't gradually getting wider towards the top, or that your rows aren't gradually shrinking as you go. Starting from the next row, repeat the sequence from row 1. I will display all the rows you need to follow on the screen, and since the row 1 was double crochet in every stitch, your next row will also be double crochet. You can also use the timestamp if you need to jump back to the beginning of the repeat. Then simply continue following the sequence as written, and also you don't need to complete the entire repeat at the end. You can stop after any row. Just make sure your final row is worked with either 1 double crochet in every stitch or 1 single crochet in every stitch. Try to avoid finishing the back panel with a back loop only row. And now let's continue crocheting off camera. Keep repeating the rows until your work reaches the length you measure at the beginning of the video for your top. To measure the length of your back panel, you need to be very careful. You need to measure on stretch, and you can measure, of course, as you go. You just need to gently drop your top because it can stretch a lot to the length. So you just need to gently drop on the flat surface and try to measure that way. Also, when I finish the back panel, I will show you how to measure properly this side of the panel. Now, when you think you are done with your first panel, don't fasten off yet. Just place a stitch marker into the loop and secure it. I will show you how to check your measurement, and you don't need to place the top on your body to measure it because the fabric is too stretchy at this stage, and if you try it on, it can stretch too much and give you an inaccurate length. To be honest, for this kind of top, it's better to make it a little shorter than too long because you can always add extra length when you sew your panels together. And to measure your panel, simply lay it flat on a surface. Don't stretch it, gently straighten the sides so the edges look nice and even. If they aren't perfect straight, don't worry, it definitely will be fine. Then you need to grab a measuring tape, and my target measurement is 42 centimeters. So I will measure from here to another edge, and I can see that I still need about 2 more centimeters, but I'm going to leave it like this for now. If I want to, I can always add extra length later after I sew both panels together. Now we are going to crochet our neckline, kind of a shoulder part, and we will crochet a few rows on one side and then a few rows on the other side. And before we begin, you need to calculate how many stitches you'll be working with on both sides, and I'll show you all the calculations. Just keep in mind that the shoulder section belongs to the front panel. Now I took my notes again, it will be easier to explain on the paper. We have done our back panel and we're going to make 2 shoulder parts. So this one will be the first shoulder and this one will be the second shoulder. The space in the middle is the neck opening, and we need to count how many stitches we need for those shoulder parts. So I had 24 stitches across the last row of my back panel. The stitch count should match the very first row. If you use stitch markers or counted stitches, it should be exactly the same. Of course, your number will be different from mine. And now you need to divide these 24 stitches by 3. And I got 8 stitches. It means I need to count 8 stitches starting from this outer edge towards here, and then another 8 stitches from the outer edge towards the middle as well. And here I have the very last row where I finished crocheting. That's why it's really good to use stitch markers, because you can see where your first stitch is and where your last stitch is. And now I need to count 8 stitches from each end. I will start from this side. When I counted the 8 stitches from each end, your number of course will be different. I will place a stitch marker into that 8th stitch, and I need to do exactly the same process for another side. And this is where you will crochet the shoulders, and in the middle will be your neck opening. I know that the top can look a little too small, but the top is super stretchy. Once it stretches, everything will fit. Now you need to insert your hook back into the loop where you have your stitch marker and chain 2. And turn your work. For the shoulder part, we are going to do half double crochet stitches. We are going to work 5 rows of half double crochet stitches on this first side. The number of rows must be an odd number for this side, and for the other side we are going to work an even number. So we are going to make 6 rows of half double crochet stitches. When you chain 2 for the first half double crochet row, chain 2 does not count as the first stitch. You need to yarn over, insert your hook into the very first stitch, yarn over, pull the yarn through the stitch. You have 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull the yarn through all 3 loops on the hook. This is your very first half double crochet stitch, and you just need to repeat those half double crochet stitches in every stitch across until you reach a stitch marker. So your last half double crochet stitch will go into the stitch with the stitch marker. I should have 8 half double crochet stitches across, and your number of course will be different. So let's do that off camera and I'll meet you for the next row. For the next row, the row 2, you need to chain 1 and turn your work. Chain 1 does not count as the first stitch, so you will continue with 1 half double crochet into that very first stitch, and you just repeat those half double crochet in every stitch across the row. In my case, I had 8 stitches, so I should have 8 stitches across. Your number of course will be different, so just let's do that off camera. Let's make those 5 rows of half double crochet stitches, and I'll meet you at the very end for the next shoulder side. Now when you finish the 5th row, you should finish on the inner side of the top. You need to place a stitch marker into this last half double crochet stitch, is just to keep a track of the stitches and have the right count. And now you need to chain 1 at the very end of the row 5. Tighten up that chain 1, leave a longer yarn tail, cut the yarn, and pull that tail through that chain 1. So now you have your first shoulder part ready. Leave both stitch markers, and now you're gonna start the second part of the shoulder. We're going to join our new yarn into this stitch with a stitch marker. To join new yarn to the other side of the shoulder, I'm using a slip knot. You can use your method if you like. I will remove a stitch marker on that inner side of the panel, insert my hook into that stitch, insert my hook into that loop, and pull that slip knot through the stitch. Now I will chain 1 and make a half double crochet into that very first stitch where I joined the yarn, and just repeat half double crochet stitches across. So if I had 8 half double crochet stitches on another side, I should have 8 half double crochet stitches on this side. Your number of stitches should match both sides. At the end of this row, chain 1, turn your work, and just repeat half double crochet stitches across. The stitch count stays exactly the same as for the first row, which was mine 8 half double crochet stitches. Yours will be different. And you just repeat this way until you have 6 rows of half double crochet stitches in total. And keep in mind that you will finish on the inner side of the edge. Now when you finish your shoulder part, your work should look like this. And now we're going to connect the shoulders, transitioning into the front panel, but at the same time the shoulder parts belong to the front panel. And you need to count how many stitches you have in between these shoulders. My number divided very nicely, and I had 8 stitches when we divided the back panel from 3, so it means I will have 8 stitches here as well. And if you have any other number on the shoulder part, like 0.5 or something like this, and you chose a different number of stitches, you might have a different number of stitches here in between. So you must count how many you have. And from here, you will be making the same number of stitches to join your shoulders. And we're going to start working from this shoulder where we finish crocheting. And we're going to make a single crochet chainless foundation. Now before you start crocheting, you need to insert your stitch marker into this last half double crochet stitch where you finish your shoulder part. It's just because it will help you keep track of the stitches, and you see why later. It's super easy to miscount on this part. Now position your work how is comfortable for you. For me, it is this way, and you need to chain 2 to start your single crochet chainless foundation. Then you need to insert your hook into this very first chain under the both loops. Yarn over, pull the yarn through, yarn over, pull the yarn through one loop on the hook, yarn over and pull the yarn through both loops on the hook. Now you have your very first single crochet stitch. Now to make the second single crochet stitch, you need to insert your hook into the very bottom of the first single crochet stitch. It's exactly the same way as you did chainless single crochet foundation at the beginning of this video for the back panel. So you insert your hook under the both loops, yarn over, pull the yarn through, yarn over, pull the yarn through one loop on the hook, yarn over and pull the yarn through 2 loops on the hook, and you have your second single crochet stitch. Now you need to repeat this way until you have the number of the stitches you counted in between the shoulders for the neckline part in between here, and you continue until the end. When you have your number of stitches, mine was 8, yours will be different. I'll meet you then. When you have the same number of stitches for the neckline, same as you had here, you need to connect this chainless single crochet foundation with another shoulder. So you need to remove a stitch marker, yarn over, and insert your hook into that very first stitch, yarn over, pull the yarn through that stitch and through those 2 loops on the hook. Now you connected your neckline with another shoulder. Insert your stitch marker into that stitch just to keep track of your stitches. So you will know that from the first stitch marker until the second stitch marker you have 8 single crochet stitches and your number will be different. Now just repeat simple half double crochet stitches as before, and you made your first stitch when you join the neckline. This is your second half double crochet stitch, so it means you should have 8 or your number across this shoulder line. Now for the next row, you need to chain 1 and turn your work, and you should have work similar to this. Chain 1 does not count as the first stitch, so you need to make 1 half double crochet into this very first stitch. And let me explain how you will be making stitches to have correct stitch count across this row. Your stitch number should be the same as for the back panel. In my case, it was 24 stitches. This is why we placed stitch markers when we made the neckline. And now we know that from the very first stitch until the next stitch marker, we should have 8 stitches or your number of stitches in total. Then in the middle part, I should have 8 half double crochet stitches too, because this was the stitch count in between the shoulders. The same applies for the other shoulder section. So now I will make 8 half double crochet stitches, and my last stitch will go into the stitch with a stitch marker. Here I'm finishing my last half double crochet stitch, the 8th one, the place with a stitch marker. I know it can look that you already crochet into foundation chain, but actually you crochet into that 8th stitch. Now you need to make the same number of half double crochet stitches across this foundation, the same you had for the neckline in between the shoulders. And at the end, it can look that you have extra stitch, but actually that is just a chain 1 from the foundation chain. From here, just crochet the same number of stitches you had in between shoulders, and I will show you what to do at the end of this part. This is the end, and this is the stitch where I said you might think this is an extra stitch, but actually you need to ignore this space and you need to start crochet into the stitch with a stitch marker, and that stitch with the stitch marker belongs to the shoulder part. So it means from here you need to crochet 8 half double crochet stitches in my case, your number of course will be different. So in total I have 24 stitches across this panel, and your number of stitches should match your number. This is how your work should look when you connected the shoulders and you made that first row after connection, and this part belongs to the front panel. So when you need to measure your front panel length, you just fold this shoulder part on top of the back panel and you measure from there. And you need to crochet the front panel the same way as you did for the back panel until it measures the same length. Before starting the next row, I recommend counting how many stitches you have across this row. This number should match the same number of stitches for the back panel. In my case, it was 24 stitches. If by any chance you have not enough stitches, like 22 or 23, it means you need to make a increase somewhere in the middle of the panel. It means you need to place an extra stitch into the same stitch as you worked before, so like 2 stitches into the same 1 stitch. And if you have too many stitches on the next row, you need to decrease in the middle of the panel. It means you need to crochet 2 stitches into 1. From the next row, you need to repeat exactly the same row sequence as for the back panel. I will put it on a screen, the rows, so you can take a screenshot or press the timestamp to go back and check the rows. And you just crochet this row sequence until you reach the same length for the front panel as you have for the back. When you want to measure the front panel length, you need to use exactly the same method as you use for the back panel. First, you need to drop the back panel, align those sides carefully, try not to stretch too much, and then you fold the front panel from the shoulder line on top of the back panel, and you will crochet the rows until it reaches the end of the bottom panel. When you reach the end of the panel, you just leave a longer yarn tail for sewing your sides and fasten off. Now when you have both panels ready, you need to align your back panel with a front. So just place your back panel on a hard surface, stretch a little bit sideways, then fold the front panel on top. Don't forget that the shoulder part is the part of the front panel, and you just need to align both panels together like this. When you aligned all edges of the front and back panels together, the side is with another side, the back and the bottom as well, corner with the corner, we will mark the openings for the arms. After we mark arm openings, we can try it on our top to see if we need any adjustments. This part can be a little bit messy because the top is very stretchy and it will stretch in length to the sides everywhere. But you still need to try it on to see if you need any adjustments for the armholes. I will show you my way of holding both panels together because I don't like to use stitch markers for that. It's too stretchy and I can lose the stitch markers while I'm trying on. So I will use a strands of yarn to hold both pieces together. But if you have any other preferences, you can do that. First, we are going to take our measuring tape. I will put on the screen how many centimeters I recommend to start measuring for each size for the arm openings, but you still need to try it on because you want your top to be comfortable for you. You need to start measuring from the top of the shoulder, and I'm doing size S. I'm usually wearing size S, so I will measure 17 centimeters. And you can see on the screen how many centimeters you need to measure for your size. Now I will take the yarn strand and I will insert into the front and back panel at that 17 centimeter in my case, so I can hold them both together, and I will tie into a gentle knot so both panels hold together while I'm trying on. Then I will do exactly the same process on the other side. I will measure, but I still need to double check if I grab both panels at the same row as on the other side. Now you need to do exactly the same process for the corners of the both panels, just to hold both panels together and to have a little bit more accurate measurement for the length while you try it on. And you need to do exactly the same between the first and the second bow right in the middle. Before you try it on, you can weave in all those yarn tails if you haven't done yet, and then we can try it on our top and see if the arm openings needs any adjustments. When you hold your top in front of you, it can look extra small and very long, but just trust the process and let's try it on. Now, when I put it on my top, you can see that it has shortened quite a lot, and it will shorten a little bit more when you attach all the sides together. When you close those gaps, it will look something like this. So if you need extra length later on, I will show you how to add. And for the arm openings, you need to check if you are comfortable with the suggested measurements. If not, you can always move a little bit higher or lower, but make sure not to move too low because the openings won't look very nice. It's supposed to be on a tighter side, but not too tight at the same time. Now, when you take off your top, you can see that it widens up at the stitch and it kind of starts taking a little bit silly shape. But for now, we are going to sew our sides together using the whip stitch method or any other method you prefer. We are going to start sewing from this bottom corner all the way up until our arm opening. You need to position your top like this and align all the edges again so it will be nicely aligned, and we are going to start sewing. As I mentioned before, you will start from that bottom corner, so remove that yarn strand or anything you use to hold your both panels together. Grab your needle, insert the yarn into a needle. I'm using the same scrap yarn. Then you need to insert the needle into the one panel's corner and into another panel's corner. Push the needle through those yarn strands, leave a little bit longer yarn tail for weaving the ends, and now you need to tie into a knot both yarn ends, the working end and the yarn tail. We're using a knot is just because it's a mesh fabric and it's a little bit annoying to really secure that side. Then you need to insert your needle in both panels under the one strand or two strands, and just make sure you're not making your stitches too tight because you want kind of this mesh effect as well as your old top, so try to make it kind of on a looser side. Then you will insert your needle not far from the previous into both panels and you push the needle through. This way you will create stitches that loops over the edge, and you just repeat inserting not far from the previous place into the both panels and push the needle through. And just repeat sewing with the whip stitch or any other method you prefer until you reach the armhole, the place you marked with the stitch marker or the yarn strand for the arm opening. And at the very end, when you reach that space where you marked with the stitch marker for arm opening, you just go through the same stitch one more time by making whip stitch just to secure it, and then you can weave in the yarn tail into the work. When you finish this side, you need to sew the other side using exactly the same method. When you finish sewing both panels together, we are going to add a few rounds around the arm opening. You will create a rounds around the armhole on both sides exactly the same way, and you will join a yarn into that underarm seam here. To join new yarn, I am making a slip knot. And I will insert my hook into the stitch not far from the underarm seam. then into a slip knot, and I pull that slip knot through the stitch. Now you need to chain one. Chain one does not count as the first stitch, and you are going to make half double crochet stitches around. So you will start from the very first stitch where you join the yarn, make one half double crochet stitch into that space. And now continue with half double crochet stitches around into those gaps where you see from turning chain. Just where you see the gap, you make half double crochet there. I will do that off camera and I'll meet you at the very end. When you reach the last gap before the seam, you need to join your work with a slip stitch, the last half double crochet with a very first half double crochet. So you need to insert your hook into that very first stitch, yarn over, and pull the yarn through the stitch and the loop on the hook. Tighten up, and your first round is ready. After the first row, place your work like this and make sure that your first row is not too loose. It's not widens up but going kind of tapered way. This is what you want for your sleeves. And on the next rounds, you're going to make a few decreases. Now for the round 2, you need to chain 1. Chain 1 does not count as the first stitch. And you will start with decrease. So you need to yarn over, insert your hook into that very first stitch. Grab the yarn, pull the yarn through the stitch, insert your hook into another stitch. Grab the yarn, pull the yarn through, yarn over, and pull the yarn through all loops on the hook. Now you decreased your first 2 stitches. Don't forget a stitch marker, and you will continue until the top of the shoulder where you're gonna make another decrease. So now you continue with one half double crochet stitch in every stitch until you reach the very top of the shoulder, or let's say you will be halfway through your sleeve. Let's continue this round off camera and I'll meet you when I finish this round. After the second round, you can notice that the top of the sleeve going kind of tapered way. That's what we want. And after this round, you need to put it on the top to see if you need extra rows for the sleeve, or you're happy just with 2 rows, or you need extra few rows for your top. For my top, I had 5 rows in total. Also, if you decided you want extra rows, just keep repeating that row 2 with the decreases at the beginning and at the midpoint. And when you are happy with the length, just chain 1, tighten up, leave a longer yarn tail, and fasten off. Then just repeat exactly the same process for another sleeve. Make sure you made exactly the same number of stitches around and you made exactly the same number of rows. After the sleeves, you are going to make 1 row of half double crochet stitches for the neckline, around the neckline, and you will be joining the new yarn into the back panel at the middle point. So for the neckline, join the new yarn into any chosen stitch on the back panel, right in the middle, chain 1, and make 1 half double crochet into the same stitch. Don't forget your stitch marker. And you will continue with half double crochet stitches in every stitch, but until the certain point. So this is the back of your panel, and the next part is the shoulder. You need to continue working half double crochet stitches until you reach this corner where is shoulder and the front panel connecting together. Here you can see from the other side until where you need to work, just the stitch right before the corner. Now when you reached that corner, you need to decrease those 2 stitches, the one on the shoulder and one on the front panel. You need to yarn over, insert your hook into the one gap, yarn over, pull the yarn through, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through, and yarn over, pull through all 3 loops on the hook, exactly the same way as you did decrease for the sleeve. Then you will continue with 1/2 double crochet in every stitch and decrease that corner, then continue through the shoulder part and the back panel until you reach a stitch marker, and then we'll join your round with a slip stitch. And this is how your neckline look when you finish that one round. It gives a nicer shape and more finished look. It's kind of rounded now instead of a square. Now when you finish the sleeves and neckline, you're going to add some length to your top if you need, of course. And if you don't need, you can move on and join the new yarn into the seam and press the timestamp for the border part. But we are going to crochet on a good side of the top. Really, there is no big difference now because everything is back and forth, very stretchy, kind of messy, but you're going to position your work like this and you will join new yarn into the seam. At this point, you already decided which side is a good side. So if you want to extend the length, we're going to do some rows around before we move on to the border part. To add extra length is very simple. You just need to attach new yarn into the seam, into the stitch not far from the seam. And you're going to chain 1. Chain 1 does not count as the first stitch. You will start with 1/2 double crochet into exactly the same stitch where you joined your yarn. And you just make 1/2 double crochet around in every stitch. At the very end, you join your round with a slip stitch, the last 1/2 double crochet with a first double crochet, and if you need more rows, you'll chain 1 again and start 1/2 double crochets around again. So it's very simple, the same way as you did for the sleeve, just this extra length is going to be without any decreases. Just a simple 1/2 double crochet into every stitch around. Now for the border, if you added extra length, you just continue with chain 1 and the border. If you didn't add extra length, you just join your yarn and chain 1. After the chain 1, you will continue with 1 single crochet into exactly the same stitch. Then insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull the yarn through the stitch and through the loop on the hook. Now you made a slip stitch, then you need to chain 3 and insert your hook into the very first chain, yarn over and pull the yarn through the stitch and through the loop on the hook, the same as a slip stitch. Now you made your first picot. Then you will insert your hook into the next stitch, make a slip stitch, into the next stitch, make a slip stitch, and you will chain 5. Then you will insert your hook into the very first chain and you will make a slip stitch. Now you have your second picot that is a little bit bigger than the first one. And you continue this way into the next 2 stitches, make a slip stitch, and you will chain 3, insert your hook into the very first chain and make a slip stitch. And you have your third picot. Now you need to continue this way, 1 slip stitch into the next 2 stitches, chain 5, and you join your chain 5 with the very first chain. So you will continue around with 1 slip stitch into the next 2 stitches, chain 3, make a smaller picot, then 1 slip stitch into the next 2 stitches, chain 5, and make a larger picot. When you finish your top, it should look like this. Check that you are happy with the sleeves and how the top sits on your body. The fabric is very stretchy, so you can adjust it to sit the way that it feels most comfortable for you. And at this point, you can decide how to finish your top. You can leave it plain, or you can add a star appliques if you would like to decorate your top. Now we are going to move on making the star appliques, and their placement is completely up to you. You can place them wherever you like. You can mirror my method as shown at the beginning of this video, or come up with your own design. For the appliques, you can use any type of yarn you like, only the size will vary, and for this one I used a 5mm crochet hook and 2 strands of sport weight yarn, and it measures around 9 centimeters. If you want a similar size, you can follow the same method and double 2 strands of sport weight yarn, which gives you a roughly an Aran weight. And you will use those yarn tails to sew the applique on the top. The other version was made with Aran weight yarn and a 6mm crochet hook. It uses a similar yarn weight but a larger hook, resulting in a size of around 12 centimeters. It's really up to you what size you want to make. I think I'm going to use 2 different sizes for my top, though I'm not completely sure yet. I'm also placing them diagonally from one shoulder down towards the opposite side. For the star appliques, you can also choose if you would like to do surface crochet on top or not. And first we're going to make a plain star, and then I will show you how to do this surface crochet. To start making your applique, you need to leave a longer yarn tail, because we are going to use this yarn tail for sewing the applique on the top. And then you will grab the yarn and place on 2 fingers. You hold onto working side and you wrap around those 2 fingers, creating an X. Hold onto that X, place the working yarn above this one, insert your hook under the first strand, grab the second strand, and chain 1. Now you need to chain 1 extra, and this chain 2 does not count as the first stitch. So you will be making 14 double crochets into the magic ring. Let's do that off camera and I'll meet you at the very end. Now when you have 14 double crochets around, grab the yarn tail and tighten the ring. Don't pull it tight all the way just yet, only enough so your hook can still slide through. And if you want to do surface crochet later, you will need to leave the center slightly loose. If you want a plain star, you can tighten it fully now. Then you need to join your round with a slip stitch. Just insert the hook into the last double crochet stitch and make a slip stitch. Tighten up. From here you need to chain 7. And you will skip the very first chain and you start working into the next. So skip this very first from the hook and make 1 slip stitch into the next chain. Into the next chain you will do 1 single crochet. Into the next 2 chains you will do 1 half double crochet in each. Into the next chain 1 double crochet, and into the last chain you will do 1 treble crochet. So you need to yarn over twice, insert your hook into that chain, yarn over, pull the yarn through the chain, yarn over, pull the yarn through 2 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull the yarn through 2 loops on the hook, and yarn over again and pull the yarn through 2 loops on the hook. Now you need to join the star arm with this circle, and the first joining is a little bit different from the rest. To join your very first star arm, you need to skip 2 stitches and join with the third, but for the first star arm, you need to count the stitch where your chain coming from as the first, so you skip that one, the next, and you will insert the hook into the third and make a slip stitch. Now you need to chain 7 again, and you will repeat exactly the same pattern as you did for the first star arm. You will skip the first chain and you will make a slip stitch into the second. Then you will continue with one single crochet stitch. Into the next 2 chains, make 1 half double crochet in each. Into the next chain, you will do 1 double crochet, and into the last chain, 1 treble crochet stitch. Now you will skip 2 stitches, start counting not from the one that your chain is coming from, but from the next. So this is the first, this one, second, and the third. You need to join your star arm with this third stitch. Now you will chain 7 and you need to continue making those star arms until you have 5 around in total. Let's do that off camera and I'll meet you at the end of the 5th star arm. At the very end, you can see that you have just 2 stitches left, so you will be joining your 5th star arm with the very first double crochet stitch where you made your circle. You insert your hook into that space and simply make a slip stitch. You need to leave a longer yarn tail because you will be using for sewing the star. I left around 60 centimeters, I think, and you just need to fasten off the yarn. Now, if you would like to leave your star plain, you can leave it like that and skip to the sewing part. Or if you would like a surface crochet or contrasting border, you need to grab a new yarn. I think the more contrasting color, the better, but it's really up to you. And now you will attach this new yarn into opposite side from where you fasten off. You need to insert your hook into that slip stitch right in between the star arms. Grab this new yarn and pull this yarn through the stitch. You need to chain 1 and tighten up. Now you will make a slip stitches around this star arm on one side and another, and you will be making 1 slip stitch in each stitch on this and another side. You need to just insert your hook under the both loops. Make sure it's not under one but under both yarn strands, and you just simply make a slip stitch. Then you will continue with another slip stitch into the next, and on this side I had 5 slip stitches across. Now you will start making slip stitches on another side, and you need to insert your hook into this very first stitch. Just keep in mind that very first one can be a little bit tricky, but it will get easier from the second. And you just simply make a slip stitch again. Then insert your hook into the next and make a slip stitch. So on this side I had 6 slip stitches across. Now you need to make 1 slip stitch in between the star arms where you did a slip stitch when you join your star arms, just right in the middle. And then you continue with slip stitches on the star arm, and you just do this all the way around until the very end where you started. At the very end, you need to join your border, so you just insert your hook into that stitch where you did a chain 1, where you join the yarn and make a slip stitch. Do not cut the yarn, we are going to continue surface crochet. Now we are going to do the swirl part in the middle of the star. Before that, if you want, you can weave in the yarn tails from contrasting colors so it doesn't get in your way. You already have the 2 tails that we use later to sew the star onto the top, so it can be pretty annoying with all those tails around while you surface crochet. And for the surface crochet, I can't really tell you exactly how to position your work because it should be comfortable for you. The way I do it is to position my work in the direction that I will make those stitches. And to start surface crochet, you need to insert your hook into the double crochet where you did your magic circle. And make sure you grab the working yarn, not the tail, if you still have that tail around like me. You need to grab that yarn, pull through the stitch, and pull through the loop on the hook. It's the same way as you do a slip stitch. And you just keep making those slip stitches around, inserting your hook in every double crochet stitch on a circle, and you will see it will go around. So you just work and position your work how is comfortable for you, just to make that first swirl part. You will finish your first swirl part with last slip stitch into the double crochet before the first slip stitch, so they are not touching. For the second swirl, you need to insert your hook into the middle of double crochet stitch from the magic circle. Just place your hook wherever it feels natural for you. Just make sure your slip stitches do not touch between the first and second swirl. If they touch slightly, that's fine, but if you can avoid them touching, it will give a little cleaner finish. And you need to continue those slip stitches around until you reach kind of that middle part, or until you're happy with the second swirl. And then we are going to finish our surface crochet right in the middle of the magic circle. When you are happy with your second swirl, you need to insert your hook into that middle part where you left your magic circle a little bit on a looser side, and just make a slip stitch. You need to cut the yarn, leave a longer yarn tail for weaving the ends, and just fasten off. Now you need to secure the yarn tail where you finish your surface crochet. Thread the tail onto a needle and pull it through the middle of your magic circle. Then weave in the yarn tail to secure it, and finally grab the yarn tail from the magic circle and tighten up. Before you sew the star applique onto the top, you need to secure your magic circle, and I will show you my way to do it. I like to wave the yarn 2 times around the circle, 2 times fully, just to make sure it's really tight and really secure. Then I will wave the yarn on top of the double crochet stitches, or if you have any other rows, on top of another rows. I just like to go back and forth like 3-4 times, just to make sure my work are not going to unravel. Don't cut this yarn tail, you can use for sewing your star onto the top. And later on, after you finish all the sewing, if it's too long, you can weave in then and cut the yarn. After you finish making all the star appliques, put it on your top and decide where you want them to go. You can position them anywhere you like, on the back, on the front. The choice is up to you. Now I'm not going to attach the stars to my top before sewing, but instead I will mark where I want the middle of the star to be using a stitch marker. Of course, if you want, you can attach the stars to your top before sewing while you tried it on. However, I won't lie, the top is very stretchy, and when it's not on your body, it can stretch in all directions, so you need to be extra careful when you sewing the star appliques onto the top, as the stars can really shift slightly during this process. If you would like to attach the star onto your top before sewing, you just simply grab a stitch markers and attach every star arm to the top where you want your applique to be. Now before you start sewing your star, place your top on a flat surface and make sure the front and the back panels is laying completely flat underneath the star. Then grab a yarn tail that you have from making the star and thread onto a needle. When you start sewing the star, place one hand underneath the panel to support both the panel and the star. This helps keep the star from shifting, so your applique stays exactly where you want it while you sew. To sew the star in place, use the same whip stitch method you used to sew the two panels together. To begin, insert a needle into a stitch that matches the color of your yarn. In my case, the yarn is green, so I will insert the needle into a green stitch. At the same time, catch the edge of the star and pick up a strand of the panel and pull it through. Then insert the needle into the next space not far from the previous one on the star. Pick up a small amount of the panel as well and pull the yarn through. And you need to continue sewing all the way around the star, keeping your stitches small and even for a neat finish. When you finish attaching the applique to the panel, pull the yarn tail through to the wrong side of your top. Then you can weave in the yarn tail by passing it through the back strands of the star until it's secure. Once you have finished sewing on all of the star appliques, your top is finished and ready to wear. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment below. I'll do my best to answer them all. And thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you in my next tutorial.